no further ado, we'd like to introduce our panel here. Starting on the left here, we have Mr. Chuck Kaiser, and he is a visiting professor at Weber State teaching business law, business ethics, and the legal aspects of contract management. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Next, we have Ms. Jerry Muir. She is the Chief of Acquisition Oversight for the ICBM System Program Office at Hill Air Force Base. Next, we have Ms. Sandy Weikart, and she is a Contracting Officer and Branch Chief in the Specialized Management Contracting Division at Hill Air Force Base. Next, we have Ms. Christine Larinaga, and she is currently a Senior Manager of Contracts for ATK Aerospace Structures Division, leading the commercial segment. Next, we have Ms. Ruth Sylvester. She works in both the systems side and the operational side of contracting as the Core Tool Department Administrator for Hill Air Force Base. And last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Craig Starnes, and he is the Vice President at Booz Allen Hamilton. Okay, and before we get started, we'd just like to give our panel members each just a brief moment just to kind of explain to you maybe their background, what kind of expertise they bring to this panel discussion, just to give you an idea of what, just hopefully kind of get a bug in here of what kind of questions you might start formulating to ask them. Start with you, Mr. Kaiser, please.
I'll be brief. I'm a retired lawyer. I spent 15 years, give or take, in private practice, then managed a healthcare company where we were heavily regulated and heavily involved in government contracts. I now teach here at Weber State. Typically, the lawyer is the guy who gets the thing when something's gone wrong. We also like to think we're involved on the front end, so we avoid things going wrong. We bracket everything that everybody else on here does, so hopefully I won't have much to say because you're all very good at what you do.
I'm Jerry Muir, and I came up through contracting through the Copper Cap program, and about 3 years ago I went on a career broadening opportunity in program management, and I'm currently working in the Minuteman 3 program office.
I'm Sandy Weikart, and I work in the Specialized Management Office in contracting. I'm a branch chief up there, and I've been in contracting for over 15 years, and I also worked in the aerospace industry, so I kind of understand the industry side, putting the proposals together and making the last FedEx drop before it gets there the next day at 2 in the morning, and that's about it.
Good afternoon, I'm Christine Larinaga. I work for ATK, Space Systems Inc., and I have about 30 years of experience in contracts management, managing both government and commercial contracts. I'm currently leading the commercial team at ATK Space Structures Division, just over here in Clearfield. So working contracts with Airbus, Boeing, major other OEMs. We also support many governmental programs.
Hi, I'm Ruth Sylvester, and I've got over 30 years of experience in contracting here, and I'm currently the QAPC for operational contracting at 75th Air Base Wing and Tenants, and then I am also the Court Tool Department Administrator.
Good afternoon, Craig Starnes. I've been with Booz for 23 years, been in the defense industry for close to 30. The areas that I focus on these days are really primarily around the Nuke Weapons Center and the air logistics complexes, and have officer responsibilities for those particular market sectors.
Okay, Ben, I'd like to thank all our panel members. We'll start off with a question here. It says, what are the current efforts to simplify government contracting? Now, I'm going to expand on that a little bit. What would you like to see simplified? Or what efforts do you think should be undertaken to simplify government contracting, or just anything that you can say on that subject? Just anyone who wants to jump in.
I guess the first thing I think, and I probably speak for a lot in this room, is we've been kind of burdened. We were talking about timelines and PALT and all that. Probably the MERT has probably been the most painful. And then when you get up to your larger dollar, your peer reviews, and just thinking about all the reviews you go through. So maybe higher thresholds for MERT would probably be something that I would like to see myself, because they're rather painful.
I guess from an industry perspective, just the clarity around specific requirements is something we always struggle with. There is the ability to respond in a lot of ways, especially these days with many of the solicitations geared towards small businesses or low price, technically acceptable types of offerings. How do you really respond to what you're looking for based on some of the specifics in the requirements, PWS, SOW, whatever it may be, seems to be a little bit broad and at times a challenge to really fit the scope with what sort of contract mechanism you're looking to do.
Yeah, and I think I would add on to that is really one of the things that as an industry representative we struggle with quite frequently, is truly understanding the requirements and the statement of work and the other elements. And so all of that timing of engagement that we just spoke about, and having someone involved earlier in the process to make sure that we're really sharing clear information and there's some transparency in those requirements, I think it makes it go much faster, and I think you get a better product.
Thank you. All right. The next question we have here, are there any opportunities for frontline contracting personnel to improve the process they work within a day-to-day basis? So I guess change over from the bottom up, so to speak. What kind of opportunities for change do you see there?
From having worked as a branch chief in contracting and then transitioning a couple years ago over to the branch chief of program managers, I think that there is a really big opportunity for things to be changed from the bottoms up. And I know that we talk top level a lot about upfront involvement, and we coin terms a lot of times that we don't have a specific document or a process where we tie that in. And I think that at the working level, that's a great place to have that dialogue. And the example I'll give you is, instead of being transactional, contracting-wise, which is unfortunately, I will tell you that's the way program managers may view you a little bit in contracting, and in general, contracting is a transaction, and unfortunately, they view finance the same way. And I would tell you, you have an opportunity to engage and say, hey, I know that you're putting together your execution plan for FY15, and it's due every July, August. They have to say how every dollar is going to go. It's a really good opportunity if you're working with an IPT to say, hey, can I see your execution plan? Because we're going to rock it. I want to know where we can execute. I'm going to identify risks to you. We're going to put together a plan, and we're going to get this done. And I'm lucky that my program folks have had contracting folks that have done that. And I will tell you, not only does it give an advanced view to contracting, but it also changes the mindset of the PM when they come back and say, my contracting person told me I had to put unfunded options on this one. I should price them out so I don't have to get 3 proposals. And it sounds silly to you because that just makes sense, but your PMs are so much in just trying to get by and trying to put out fires that some of those things are going to be lost on them. And so if you find out what they want to do 3 or 4 months from now, you might see an opportunity that they're going to miss. So I say, yeah, there's a big opportunity for early upfront PK involvement at the ground level to drive efficiencies.
Since the title of this forum is supposed to be cooperation amongst the different factors here, the CO, the PM, the core, and the contractor, what kind of efficiencies there do you think we can drive through cooperating together, and what are we not now doing that we should be doing in that aspect? Any thoughts?
I guess kind of building on Gentleman Masiello's point earlier about having the engagement with industry early and often, I think is something that we really want to continue to see happen. I think that really helps you get a better product from an expectation perspective as to what you're looking for, but it also helps industry drive towards what really the goal of the end state of that particular requirement is. I think one of the keys, and I don't want to embarrass you too much, but one of the keys that contributes to success in this is really the transparency and the open dialogue and discussion that we have with our contracting officials as an industry representative. Ms. Marshall, amongst others, is extraordinarily open to hear the types of issues, challenges, problems that we share as both, a prospective client or a current client, in trying to help the mission evolve. So I think just the transparency of the discussions and making sure that you're actually dialoguing openly with industry certainly helps some of these procurement challenges down the road.
I think if I could just add on one more thing to that, and it's the whole concept of forecasting. Sometimes we think about forecasting just in terms of the existing contracts. But really, I think if you're working together, industry will be able to help you look at their forecasts, and you can ask them things such as, what are your capital expenditure forecasts? What are your technology roadmaps that you're working to right now that maybe we could use in future opportunities? So I think the more we do dialogue with one another, share forecasts, share future desires, it's going to innovate, and it's going to help us find new ways to work together.
The last thing anybody wants is surprises. The last thing anybody wants is problems that come out of nowhere. And sooner or later, that problem started small, and by the time it was discovered or communicated, if you wait long enough, it became bigger than it needed to be. So I would absolutely say that the communication aspect and the dialogue that we're all mentioning up here is key to smoothing out the process.
And then I'll just piggyback on all of that too. So the president's budget went over to the Congress last week. So as far as it drives a whole lot of questions about are these dollars executable? Can you really use them? Should we just pull them? Should we take them? So I'm kind of the new kid on the block in the office, and they're like, yeah, it's kind of an FM thing, but we want you to look at these schedules and just tell us if we're executable to get these things on contract or over to the depot in time to use that money like we said we did. We have some issues. We have some challenges, like whole years separated. So kind of sat down with the PMs, and we said, okay, so when we palmed for this money, like what was your cost estimate based on, and what kind of market research did you do? And like one of them, they're like, well, I had 4 hours to put my chart together to say what I needed, and so I did the best that I could with my one engineer and me. And so this, we had some problems. And so taking that back and having lessons learned like that, we realized, okay, so it's no surprise what we need in FY17. It's not, I know my engineers know that. They know it. Engineering, I don't know if you know engineering, but they're not just working one day in advance. Those guys are crunching the numbers, and they're like building graphs and charts. And so we said, okay, so what are our 17 risks coming out of our risk management board, out of the engineering community? What are my big rocks? And so today, out of the directorate level, they pushed a call and said, hey, for FY16 and 17, these are our programs coming. Within the next 6 months, we need you to post market research. We need to know how long your engineering manufacturing development phase is going to be. We need to know, are they going to rehost software? Are they not? We need to know your overall, not like a firm acquisition strategy, but we need to start asking those questions, because industry can give us a lot better answers if we ask them early. And then we get a better cost estimate, we have a better schedule estimate, and then we put our palm in. Right now, the poor PMs they're doing all that stuff after they've been told what money they're going to get and in what year. So the PMs are trying to put a square peg into a circle hole, and that's why there's a lot of frustration. And so I think a lot of this too is not creating new meetings. It's not creating a new forum. We just need better dialogue. We need to keep the engineering process, talking to the program process, talking to the finance process, and talking to the poor people in contracting that are going to receive this stuff at the end of the game. And that's what we need. And we need like branch chief level, we need lead level, we need folks to make common sense questions and say, what are you guys getting out of risk? And yeah, they'll look at you and say, well, contracting, what are you doing asking me about my risk? And I know there's program folks out here. You should share your risk stuff with contracting. You should absolutely share it with them. They have great ideas. And, you know, we can get really good ideas from industry about ways to make my costs more affordable, like General Masiello talked about. So I think we need to kind of just figure out what everybody's already doing and just let's all make these processes talk to each other.
Thank you. We have another question that came up. It's, after contract award, what are some of the problems you face in getting started on contract performance? From the government's view, from the contractor's view, and do you have suggestions on how to solve these problems?
Well, I guess probably once you award the contract, the best thing to do is, you know, have some post-award orientation and work, but it depends on if you're awarding to a new contractor and you have some transition that can make it a little more challenging. But I think engaging as soon as, you know, as possible with the successor contract, if that's the case, to make sure you go through all the terms and conditions, everybody understands the contract. And even before getting to that point, one thing I always try to do is always post a draft RFP so that everybody in industry sees it more than once. So not only your final RFP, and then they can give you feedback on it, and you can have a better product and then hopefully a better contract that makes more sense down the road.
Well, of course, coming from the QAPC, what else am I going to say? But you need to get your cores trained and ready to be able to work when the contract is awarded. And yeah, there's problems with that program, but we need to work through it. It is mandatory, so we don't have any choices. And but even headquarters and AFMC and staff and OSD are trying hard to iron out a lot of the bugs.
One of the things that we try to do, just as a new engagement is getting kicked off, is, you know, obviously marry that up with what the proposed solution or objective was of the drill to start with, but also look at, you know, maintaining the relationship management between the various stakeholders here. So it's not just, you know, the technical team and the PM. It's actually working with our contracts and the government contracts. It's working with the quality folks on our side with the delivery technical side as well. So I think it kind of is multifaceted, and things like PMRs and things of that nature really help drive to some kind of I guess standardization across these types of deliveries and transition of contracts. But I think you know, the key thing that we keep talking about, and it clearly is a huge component of the things that we do, is just the dialogue and communication across the stakeholders, not just the in-state client, but also the folks that are representative across the contract side as well.
So I think one of the most effective tools is really to have a joint kickoff meeting where you have traditionally our programs are major contracts. There's developmental activity going on with them. It's major systems, major structures. The customer or the government, depending on what tier we're performing at, they have an IPT, we have an IPT. I like to bring the IPTs together, and as part of that kickoff meeting, we do some peer mapping to say, who is my peer, who should I be speaking to? And then I like to have a cadence of weekly meetings. Maybe they're executive meetings followed by working level meetings. They are in conjunction with, and they don't replace the PMRs and the other, you know, ongoing activities. But it's really all about fostering the understanding and that collaboration, that communication, because that is really where you're either going to succeed or fail.
Thank you. Just in case I didn't make it clear before, if you write down a question, you have something, please pass it to the end of the row so we can come grab that from you and get to all these questions that we can here. The next question we have coming from the audience has to do with requirements. The government has a difficult time developing them. This is more towards industry, but we would be interested in hearing, of course, any government insight in this. Does industry prefer to respond to a PWS, or would they rather respond to a SUE with a CSAP? and just kind of your perspectives on that.
You can go ahead and go first.
I think that means neither one of us know the answer to it, right?
Right.
I guess, me personally, I kind of like the PWS elements probably just a bit more, but you know, it's all relative. It's all kind of what specific requirements are and what's, you know, what the Sioux states and what you're actually looking to get accomplished. You know, it gets back to, you know, if you want a really in-state product or solution that is based on a series of requirements, clearly the better requirements that you write, however that you write them, are going to be helpful to industry to give you the right answer. So I don't know, my AT colleague might have a different opinion here.
Well, I was really going to give the proverbial, it depends.
Yeah.
But I think it really is based on, you know, what is it that the contracting opportunity is about. And I like the fact that we're using draft RFPs and we're getting information out and we're actually building a better RFP so that we can be more responsive, so that the understanding is better between the parties. And then it will make sense as we go through that process together. What do I really need to provide so that you can bid it well and so that I know that the performance will get done? I also think it's really important, and I wanted to just piggyback on the risk comment. The more the risk is shared, the more there's an understanding of that, it's going to help drive not just the cost, but those cost mitigation and cost avoidance techniques that both parties can engage in. So if we're open and transparent about risk and we understand, hey, you know, because there's so much risk at this early stage of the development, maybe we're going to do a different contracting type, a cost contracting type. But over the course of time, we're going to move to a fixed price contract type. We can dialogue about that and talk about the milestones that relate to that developmental process and what might be the right time to make those transitions.
Thank you. We have another question that came up. It's a couple of parts to it. It says, in your opinion, what is the primary benefit of court? How well do you think the court is fulfilling its purpose? And what would you like the government and industry to do to improve court?
Okay. Court tool has a lot of issues. We all know that. The biggest problem with court tool is that it is not just for the Air Force. It is for DoD wide. So what happens is that anytime we try to make a change, all of the higher level, SAP type level points of contact for that have to agree to it across all of the agencies. That is almost impossible to get everybody to agree to a change. So that's part of the problem. I think the other part of the problem was that when they contracted this to be developed for the new program under WAF, the contractor wasn't allowed to see any of the programming that went into the Army one, and yet they were supposed to create it as a mirror image. It makes it a little difficult when you don't know what is in there and how it works. Is it a good tool? I think in theory it's an excellent tool, and I really liked it when it was under the Army program because it seemed to be easy to use. This one, the current one, is a little more cumbersome and has a lot of things that needs to be repaired. The problem is if they fix something, one thing, it's causing problems with other aspects. So we're still just running into, I think it's going to take another year or 2 years before it stops morphing and we actually have a really good workable program. As for the cores, yeah, they're valuable. They need to be there. They're there to help to ensure that the contract's being done properly and that we're getting the service that we paid for. We can't be everywhere, and they need to know what their parameters are for being able to deal with the contract and the contractor. So in reality, it's a good thing. And the reason that we went to court instead of being under the QAP is because I don't believe it would ever happen here at Hill. But at many of the other bases, the cores were doing, the QAPs were not doing anything. They weren't doing any inspections, doing any of their job, and contracting wasn't reviewing any of the information, and they had no clue that the service wasn't being inspected. So they said, we need to change this and we're going to make it enforceable, and that's part of the reason for the court tool is now contracting has to go in and has to approve or disapprove the quarters inspections.
Thank you. Next question is, as we seek better communication, greater efficiencies, and clarity of requirements, can you share one of your division's greatest successes and or a lesson learned?
I think we're going to have feedback with that one over there.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I think, last year I sat down with my branch, and, we noticed that our cost estimates, I know you all in contracting are going to be surprised, some of our cost estimates were a little off. I know. You're all shocked. No, we had a problem with our cost estimates being just completely either way too high or way too low, and they drive thresholds and clauses and and all that good stuff. And so we brought one of our cost estimators up, and if you don't know there's a difference between budget and cost, learn the difference because it will totally help you. So we bring our cost estimator up, and he runs us through some of our cost estimates, and he says, well, the biggest problem I have is your engineers are spread way too thin. I'm not getting good information on the requirements about exactly what parameters engineering-wise you need out of the system, what all the interfaces are. So we do our best with your PM, but we make some faulty assumptions, and lo and behold, faulty assumptions drive schedules berserk and cost berserk, right? So we sit down with our team, and I had a really sharp GS13 lead on the program side, and I said, okay, you guys, I can't bring you more engineers. We're on a hiring freeze, and so, hey, it's really good to hear that I can't fix your engineering problem, but I said, but we can't live with cost estimates. We're going into a budget process. We got to have better cost estimates for our budget, guys. So the 13 says, okay, if I can't get more engineers on my side of the house, then I'm going to leverage industry. I'm like, okay, Greg, how are we going to leverage industry? And he said, I'm going to do market research. And he said, they better get ready because I'm going to ask them all kinds of questions. So he sat down with his cost estimator and said, what do you need to know? What are your key drivers? Then he went through the engineering review board process and said, what are your worries? What are your concerns? And he wrote all of those down. And then we had a stellar contracting person who's actually sitting over there, loving on me, Thomas. And so they sit down and they come up with all these questions about their program and stuff. And they posted a 22-page draft requirement document. They posted 10 or 15 specific questions from across their IPT, and it wholesale changed the approach of that contract. And I don't have an engineer on that program. I have an engineer split across 3, but now I have information that when I do get that valuable time with my engineer, I can ask him questions, and it was a really good thing, and that all came from a section lead saying, okay, my costs are kind of stinky, how can I work with what I've got in order to leverage that? And it really worked well, and industry really had some inputs that really changed our assumptions. And when we took those assumptions back to our engineering board, they said, yeah, that's totally doable. We're totally comfortable with that. That makes sense. So I would tell you, these processes they don't stand alone. And nobody's going to drive a tasker to you to tell you to sit down and run this by people. We need business advisors, we need financial advisors, and we need PMs that see across the whole gamut. And we're not going to get more people. Our budgets are going to be scant. So we better make sure that whatever we're doing is cross-feeding and we're talking. And that was one where our cost estimate changed and my execution strategy totally changed because at the IPT level, they all talked.
Yeah, I guess interesting that a couple of these themes come around cost estimating. It was interesting back in, it's been a few years ago, we had a NASA job that we were working in. I was in the NASA market at the time. And I had this young engineer that, he got really frustrated. He had this 1,000-pound brain, and there was some sort of cost estimate that he had to come up with. So he was using some sort of COTS product or whatever, and so he ended up he basically, the story he told me, and I'm not quite sure if he ad-libbed this a little bit or not, but knowing him, he probably didn't, was he actually took some vacation and he got a couple of his buddies from his grad school program, and they got in their basement, and they actually, for like a week, and he said there's pizza boxes and there's all kinds of stuff all over the place, and they figured out this really high-end algorithm that could get to a cost baseline that and it could do it in about a fraction of in seconds, in the same sort of calculation for some of these NASA types of jobs that had taken days to run some of these different sorts of scenarios. And so coming full circle, he comes back and he gets all excited about this model. It ended up being a model that saved NASA a tremendous amount of work, and it was efficiencies because they went back and they talked to the client, they talked to the customers, they talked to the contracts folks, and they actually now they even had to go to brief this particular program on Capitol Hill about it was in that dire straits, but with the ability to get this kind of creative juices of this one individual, they actually were able to kind of get the program turned around and get some realistic and reality-based cost estimates that gave this program a secure future for many years. I mean, I thought it was kind of innovative that he actually took the time to think through this, but the fact that it saved both us from an execution, but it also was certainly a huge benefit for the industry, for the government client and the end state was rewarding as well.
Thank you. The next question we has to do with the eternal conflict of CO versus PM. We have a cat and dog relationship here. I won't say which is which. It says, how does the CO get the PM to understand that contracting isn't an impediment? And I guess just kind of the inherent conflict between getting the requirement on, getting the warfighter or the customer what they need, and the people trying to make sure that it's done by the rules, by the law. And is that something that you see in industry as well?
Yeah, we definitely see that in industry. One of my favorite stories to tell is that at one point in a negotiation, somebody said, well, stop, we better go get Christine and make sure that she's involved in this. And the PM's response was, oh, dear God, how long do you want this to take? I said, you guys, I'm just going to come in and ask some good questions. But I think that there really is that inherent, sometimes conflict is the way we might think about it. The way that I prefer to think about it is that contracts management and COs or contracts managers, they really need to be partners. And we should really look at ourselves as partnering together. We're going to build the strength of a program together. And so while one of us may have a view for compliance, a view for making sure that we're doing the right thing, while the other one wants to be innovative and moving quickly, I think respecting one another's roles and responsibilities and understanding the value that you each bring to the program is what will really get you over those hurdles.
I was just going to say, I think it's really important that us as COs in contracting, that we just keep in mind that we should never tell our customer no, we should tell them how. Because there's always one way to get there, more than one way to get there. And I always encourage the program folks to come to us early, engage often, because just feeding off of what General Masiello said earlier, you may be off as a program manager trying to solve the world's problems and getting all flustered about it and not knowing there may be an easier way to get there if we just communicate from a program and contracting standpoint. So I think that's one of the keys. And again, just being flexible and making sure that you communicate often with your customers so that they don't look at us as barriers. If you're always just in there saying, no, you can't do that, there's no way I can get that done, and you don't offer solutions as a business advisor, that's really not conducive to a good, healthy working relationship with your customers.
Yeah, I think just a little bit of a different twist. One of the things that we may end up trying to facilitate when we see circumstances like that is actually how can we pull together the stakeholders in terms of whether it's the PM or the contracts. There may be a conflict as to what particular, issue is at hand, and almost, bring the attention to both folks at the same time. It's almost like, how do we facilitate some sort of better understanding? Because in more times than not, they look at things through two different lenses, and how can we, as the folks that are actually on the execution side of it, really help merge those two? And I think sometimes it's helpful that industry gets has some ability to engage there as well.
Actually, I laugh because I thought the same thing. I thought, there's 20 of us across Hill Air Force Base. I think I'm the only one in contracting. And all the rest of our program side, we get talking, and even though we're talking, the core program or QAPC issues, I still get, okay, we don't understand you, you're talking contracting ICSM. So it doesn't matter which area you're in, we have to really make sure that we are expressing it in a way that they're understanding it, and vice versa, because we do talk a little bit of different terminology as we're going through this process, and that makes it more difficult.
The question used the term CO versus PM.
It's good that a lawyer's going to talk about it.
Yeah, it's the big V we see in all cases. And I'm putting on my lawyer hat for a second. No one likes to be told you can't do that.
Exactly.
And if you don't get involvement in the initial stages, somebody's going to have gotten way down the road, whether the PM or not, and decided this is what we must do. You take it to the CO says, well, that's the one thing you can't do. Go back to the drawing board. How many people in here have been sent back to a drawing board only to come back with yet another proposal and said, no, you can't do that? Isn't it easier if you just work through it together, so you're working not at cross purposes? And it gets back to what we said, whether it's communication or collaboration. It can't be an adversarial relationship, because that will only exacerbate the problem. You have to have the buy-in from both sides early on. It saves time, saves effort, saves frustration, and it saves this versus type of mentality. It really does. As a lawyer, in a regulatory environment, I can't tell you the times people have said, well, we've got this great idea. What if we just did this? And I said, yeah, that violates about 4 government regulations. We'll be in jail. Sounds great, but the government says you can't do it that way. So let's get together and think of a way you can do it, instead of me just having to be Dr. No. And then I'm the bad guy. I don't like to be the bad guy. Lawyers, sometimes we thought it was bad guys. It was a shock. We don't like to be that. So get it in and get it together earlier and avoid that problem.
I think the only thing I would add is, first of all, there's 2 people that keep program managers out of stripes in orange, and it's your contracting officer and your legal advisor. So I would say that. But there's been a lot of good things said, and as far as like partnerships and stuff, I know that with my program managers in my branch, I had to work really hard to say, and this seems like kind of trivial, but I said, when you bring up that contracting has a problem, no, your IPT, we have a problem. We have a challenge. And just replacing like terms like that, it sounds silly, but when we use words like us and them about challenges that we're facing in acquisition, it reflects that there is a dividing line, and I don't have ownership of what's going on over there. It's being done to me, not with me. So I really want to emphasize that how we think about, and it is all about relationships. This is not about transactions. It is relationships. And if you are an integrated product team, it is a we problem. So if you're using, or your PMs are using us and they, you don't have to have a big soapbox dialogue, but say, yeah, it sounds like we have a problem, and I'm going to help us get better. So I would say, look at that. And then I told my PMs, I told them I really feel really strongly that this is an IPT acquisition, and there's different stages in that. But I said, I feel really strongly that if you go to clearance as a team, you will be a team. I expect my PMs to go to business clearance and to contract clearance, and I expect them to be sitting shoulder to shoulder with their buyer and their PCO. They need to be there. Now, I didn't know all the time when those things happened. And they said, well, that's contract. Now I'm over the fence. I contract, it's like a Coke machine. I feed them my PR, I push a little button, and a contract spits out the bottom. No, get into the Coke machine. And so I just let them know. They're like, well, this is, and I had one of them say, I don't have time to go to that. I'm like, it's going to be an hour. And if you don't go, your PCO is going to be asked technical questions, and guess where those are going to come? Because contracting's not going to answer them. You're going to get an email, and you're going to get a list of things to do, and it'll take you longer than your 1 hour's worth of time to resolve them. So why don't you just go, hear the questions they're being asked, be a team, answer the questions, and it'll save you time in the end. And then the second thing I would say on the flip side, when I go to a program management review, I can tell my good contracting people because they're in the room and they don't need a special invite to be there. And I'll tell you, we had a meeting last week with our PEO. He came up. And I thought this was the best endorsement of contracting and the things that are being done on these IPTs when there was a key question that came out. There was an engineering question, and the branch chief walked over to the chief of engineering and said, "Where's engineer so-and-so? This is the third time the issue's been raised. Why isn't he here?" "Well, he's kind of, did you guys invite him?" And he looked straight out and said, "I didn't invite PK. They're all over there. I didn't invite FM. They're all over there. Do I have to give your guy a special invite to be a member of my team?" So I would just tell you that working together means that you are together. If there's a program review, you go. You support it. If you're in program management and there's a business clearance, you go and you support it because you're a team. So we got to get out of this like language about, we got to walk our talk, I guess is what I'm saying. And that means you have to look at the way you're acting as an IPT, and is it a we or is it a us and they or me and them?
Thank you. Next question, it says, how does the industry feel about RFIs, sources sought, draft RFPs, and the extent of how time consuming are things?
Let's see. I think the short answer is getting more clarity and more information out to make the official requirement something that you're comfortable responding to is helpful to everybody. RFIs definitely, have a sense of, okay, this isn't a real proposal, but let's get, kind of tee up some of the issues, some of the constraints, some of the challenges that we see, and maybe even, put some thought into the responses that will kind of lend themselves to solutions that perhaps they weren't necessarily thinking of before. So I think just by and large, if I'm thinking RFIs or any sort of draft RFPs, it's industry's way, without giving away the farm, is to actually coming up with some ideas, some requirements that will help make the final product, the final RFP, much more effective in terms of what the ultimate product is.
Yeah, I agree very much with that. And then I would just say that there is a kind of downside or a flip side to this whole process is just like the government industry is very budget driven. And so we have a limited budget, and to have repetitive or iterations that aren't really value added is not helpful to either side of the coin. And so the more time that is spent in preparation, it's going to save a lot of time and a lot of money over the course of the program. So before the draft RFI goes out or the draft requirements go out, even then it's still okay to talk to each other and make sure that something is getting put together that's going to be able to be responded to and is worth the investment that the various suppliers are going to make in that response.
I've seen cases litigated, contracts litigated over 2 ambiguous terms in a 20-page document. If you want to avoid that, and that's very costly, it's damages relationships, etc., then it helps to have the clarity with draft RFPs or fully understood RFPs before the contract is ever signed. So despite the fact that it does take a little bit of upfront effort and a little extra money, it's far cheaper than litigating and having bad results later. So yeah, I think it's very valuable.
True.
Thank you. Our next question here has to do with kind of the title again, contract performance. And that how do we get from a well-executed contract, or how do we get to a well-awarded contract to a well-executed contract? A lot of times, a lot of our emphasis happens to be with getting the contract on, getting it awarded, but then we don't really pay a lot of attention to how it's managed, how it's executed. So kind of the thoughts on transitioning from contract award to contract execution.
Well, I guess one of the things that has changed over time with our particular firm is, we go at great lengths to celebrate contract awards, and it's like we have, we spend a lot of time on capture. We get really excited about the wins. And, I think the industry at large really, the reason that they're in the position that they are is usually the success of what they're actually delivering. And so we started really probably, it's always been, quality's always been one of our 10 core values, but we started really looking at the ability to recognize success in delivery just as much as success in contract awards. And so we do a lot of kind of quality reviews, and we have a corporate level of reviews on most all contracts that really emphasize, the secret to success of being around for a while is having the same customers come back to you. And I think at the end of the day, celebrating delivery execution to the same extent that we celebrate contract award success has given us a lot of lift with our delivery teams.
I would just maybe add too that in addition to celebrating the common successes throughout the lifetime or the life cycle of the program, it's really important that at the beginning we pick metrics together that make sense. And so I was in a session earlier today where we talked about the importance of choosing the right metrics. Just because we can measure something doesn't necessarily mean that that's really going to be the metric or the set of metrics that help us perform well. So coming up with objectives and metrics that we can use, adjusting those and being adaptive and flexible over the life cycle of the program to say, we used to measure that, but now it's more important that we measure this. And then again, really celebrating those successes.
I think it's important to communicate the expectations to the team of people who will be in charge of performing the contract versus just the people that were in charge of capturing and getting the contract in the first place. I'll keep it gender neutral, but would you please take out the trash? And you say, sure, I'll get to that. And 20 minutes later, it's, honey, I thought you said you were going to take out the trash. Oh yeah, I'm still working on it. And about the fourth time you get reminded, that person finally says, fine, that four-letter F word, I'll take out the trash myself. And it did get done. It was performed. You'll be paying for it for quite some time and lost relationships, etc. And I know that sounds incredibly simple, but it's the Nike version of contracting. Just do it. There are goals that are in your contracts. There are benchmarks. You have to meet them. And getting back, if you're not going to meet them, you better have some very good reasons. And it can't be, well, they're doing this, or you go to your superior and say, well, the other side is. You have to have solutions to address why they're not getting done, but the smoothest performing contracts are the ones that actually get done. That's incredibly, again, very simple. But that's where you have to go with this. That has to be your baseline expectation is we're going to get it done on time, at budget, and if we're going to have problems, they can't be surprises. You'll avoid all kinds of down the road, downstream problems if you just do it. As simple as that sounds.
Next question. How is industry aligned in terms of what types of cross-functional dialogue occurs? And a person who posed the question also said that they feel the government is compartmentalized and from my perspective, not as collaborative.
Well, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, we do have integrated product teams. Most of the major corporations within the industry, the aerospace industry in particular, uses the integrated product team. Many of the corporations or companies use that structure on every single program that they have. There are others that may have an integrated product team just for major developmental activities, which is something that I think the IPT is such a helpful way to align your teams and make sure that they have someone across the board or on the other side who is their peer and that they've been mapped to, so that we can really be very functional and we can be dynamic.
I guess, we're organized internally in a really market-facing type of organization. And one of the things that we really do, and I think we do pretty effectively, is do some of these cross-cut initiatives. So we share, in open forums at least once a month across the leadership teams of various, whether it be an Air Force team or an Army team or an intelligence community team, just the same sorts of concepts that are challenges or issues that you see perhaps that come up in the Air Force. How can we leverage something that perhaps the Army team has gone through already through another contract that they've got some history with? So it is intentional the way that we had kind of organized from a service perspective of looking at the ability to be agile and answer the questions that in one market that, maybe we're not asked to do that today, but at some point down the road, more times than not, that same sort of skill set or capability or product or, challenge that a client may have it transcends whatever market area that you're in. So the ability to kind of share those types of ideas, functional community types of things, I think it certainly helps us.
The good news is you're not alone. The bad news is you're not alone. All industry, the bigger you get, the easier it is to silo off and protect your own turf and focus very narrowly on what it is you have to get done. It happens across all industries. Healthcare is just massive at that. But if you can identify the stakeholders, and we've used that term quite a bit up here, who might have an interest in what you're doing that are outside of your very small zone of influence, and you can see how what you're doing might affect the stakeholder and who else might have a similar effect on that stakeholder early on, you'll start to break down some of those silos and you will get some cross-functional dialogue. But it has to be done that way. It's not going to be done from a broad institutional edict. That's we can say it all day long and that's not going to cure it. It has to be done almost from the bottom up, a grassroots thing, and it has to be done early.
And I would just say the grassroots people will have a lot better opportunity to do that if we have first-line supervisors and mid-level managers identifying opportunities to do that. And I would tell you, because people will talk. People at the working level are friendly. They want to collaborate. They have the intention to do that. But unless somebody who can see things with a little bit broader of a scope outside of one little IPT, if they can see where that IPT's efforts fit into a process of requirements generation or risk analysis or execution plan, then they can say to their folks, hey, why don't you go ask your PM for his execution plan? Did you know that they have a key risk they need to mitigate in 17? You got to talk to them about it. So if you're a first-line supervisor, you have a really, really big opportunity, because by the time you get to second-line supervisor or third, sometimes you lose track of the where the rubber hits the road on the process, where the touch points are. And so I think first-line supervisors have a really big opportunity, and leads too. I think leads really do too, to be able to say, I think we should ask this question. Let's see what it does. And I do think that it needs to come from the bottom up. So.
I was just going to say one thing on top of that. The one thing that frustrates me the most is if you ask somebody if you followed up on something and you get, well, I sent an email a week ago and I haven't heard from them. That seems to be the mode of communication. So I think if we're going to try to become more collaborative, we need to just get away from just slinging an email and thinking that you've contacted that person. Follow up. If you have to, heaven forbid, get up out of your chair and walk to their desk. The old ways of communication, it might be more productive.
Call center people will call me 6 times a day until they get a hold of me. Why can't you? This is your job. So let's again, it's the just do it mentality, but don't tell me you left 3 voicemails. That's not getting it done. What are you going to do other than leave voicemails? Because 3 times you're out. You strike 3. What's your next thing? Because if I have to do it, I don't need you, and now we've got a different problem, right? There we go. Thanks.
Okay, with that, I think we'll have to wrap up. We'd like to apologize. We did have a lot of great questions we unfortunately weren't able to get to for time. We'd like to give our panel one more round of applause. Thank you.